like to call the meeting to order. Everyone can please rise to the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Trustee Costa?
Present.
Trustee Caprio? Trustee Rogers? Present. Trustee Sheets? Present. Trustee Maxey-Trustee? Present. Trustee Varian? Mayor Yukich?
Present. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Okay. And go ahead. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 11th, 2015 Village Board meeting?
I so move.
Trustee Suisse,
I'll second.
second by Trustee Maxey-Trustee. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, is there any, no discussion on it, so motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 18th, 2015 special village board meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Trustee Costa, Trustee Rogers. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is appointment. I need a motion to approve the appointment of Nancy Carlson to the Environment Committee.
I so move.
First by Trustee Suisse. I need a second.
Second.
Costa? Okay. Is there any discussion? Did you want to say something, Sharon?
No, I think she'll make a great addition to the Environment Committee. She has been in the village since 1995, and she's been attending quite a few Environment Committee meetings, and she'd like to be a permanent member. And she also currently works at Pilcher Park Nature Center as a naturalist.
Okay. Thank you. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Welcome, Nancy, to the Environment Committee. Next will be reports and communications from the mayor and other officers. I'll start for right now. I want to thank everyone that came to the annual tree lighting on Monday at Homer Junior High. This was the 9th annual event. It was very successful and everyone enjoyed the holiday music from the Homer Junior High show. It should be high school choir, show choir. Okay. And then we had a visit from Santa Claus. We want to thank the village staff, the Homer Fire District, the Homer Highway Department, Homer Glen EMA, and the Homer Junior High School administration for assisting us with this special event. Also, thank you to Homer Glen's Jewel Osco Meyer stores for the generous sponsorship of the event. Second, volunteers needed for Community and Economic Development Committee. We want to start the committee back up, so we are looking for the committee to act as a recommending body which advises the village board and staff on planning the economic health of the community consistent with the goals established in the comprehensive plan. The Community and Economic Development Committee will address issues related to community development, for example, comprehensive planning, growth strategies, and community services. And economic development, example, business retention, recruitment relations, and marketing. Any residents interested in volunteering to serve on the village's community and economic development are encouraged to submit via email, a letter, and an explanation of why you are interested in serving on the CEDC and how you can contribute to the work. Also, please provide a resume listing your employment, education, and prior experience in civic service with the village or other organizations. To the Village of Homer Glen, attention Mayor Yukich, at 14933 South Founders Crossing, Homer, Glen, Illinois, 60491, or you can go online at village@homerglen.org. Last, I want to thank all the residents who provided feedback to the village trustees and I regarding the proposed gasoline tax. We received feedback from residents that were both in support and in opposition of the tax. The trustees and I thoughtfully reviewed all feedback that was received. The proposed gas tax was first discussed at the October 28, 2015 Village Board meeting as a workshop item. Since then, the village has requested resident feedback through notices on the village's website, my letter to the editor, which appeared in the Homer Horizon, and my weekly mayor's blog, as well as coverage by the local newspapers. Later in this meeting, I will be asking the trustees for a motion to direct the finance director and village attorney to draft an ordinance imposing a 3-cent per gallon motor fuel tax to be designated for Parks and Recreation Fund use. Tonight's motion is only the calling for an ordinance to be drafted. If approved at a future meeting date, the board would vote on an ordinance imposing the 3-cent gas tax. And just for my own side notes, everyone that contacted me, good or bad on the gas tax, I contacted every one of them. I had 7, even after putting my letter to the editor with my phone number on it. I had 1 gentleman call from that. I had a few emails from others. Out of the 7, I talked to 6 of them. Once we explained to them exactly what we were trying to do, all 6 were on board. I'm still trying to get a hold of one of them. He just hasn't called me back, but I've left 6 messages for him, and I do plan on talking to him. So at least this way, if he does have a question, I can answer it. Not saying that I can win him over, but I did the other 6. So this is going to be very good for the village. And with that, we'll go to the trustees, and we will start with Trustee Meinsky.
I have nothing to report this evening.
Okay. Trustee Costa.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to report for the Public Safety Committee this evening. In the past few years, we have put down speed counters in various streets in our subdivisions. Some of the streets we find that, are posted speed limits 25. When you look at the median speed going through on a percentile, the percent of people going down the streets, we found that a lot of vehicles are going within the speed limit or reasonably within the speed limit. What we have been finding, though, is an increased speed in our subdivisions. Just 3 or 4 of them that we did this year, we actually have 3 of them that are 85% of the vehicles that are going down the street are in excess of 35 miles an hour. Actually, we have one subdivision, I looked at the results and really studied a lot. We had 80 cars that were doing between 50 and 68 miles an hour down a residential street in a 7-day period. That is just a recipe for disaster. I mean, you've got driveways, you've got kids that are out there now. With the time change, it's darker earlier. You have people, residents that are walking down the street, they're jogging. They don't necessarily wear bright clothes. If you're going through a subdivision and speeding those kind of speeds, it's going to be hard to see somebody and someone could get hurt. A couple of the streets, of course, Lieutenant Fish, we found his auto bodies at our meetings. He puts extra deputies on that for traffic calming. We have seen an increase in traffics and speeding tickets on those streets, and actually have reports back from the residents saying that it's made a big difference. Unfortunately, when a deputy leaves, the speeds go right back up. So we're asking everybody, let's police ourselves. The speed limits are posted in our residential areas at 25 miles an hour. There's a few streets that are at 20, but pretty much everything is 25. Public Safety Committee right now is looking at possibly purchasing some speed humps or speed tables. We put them in some of these subdivisions and streets that there's problems on that will slow traffic down. I'm sure we're going to get residents that complain because now you're going to have to go down to 5 miles an hour to get over them. We just want to keep our streets safe for everybody. Let's police ourselves. Let's please slow down. Make this a safe and happy holiday season. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Trustee Costa. Trustee Rogers.
Again, I just want to encourage people to support our businesses, shop locally whenever possible. Maybe change your traffic patterns a little bit if you find yourself the ability to maybe go a different way a couple different times, and you'll find that you're gonna come across a lot more businesses in Homer Glen than you thought were there, and you'll be able to find the opportunity to make your purchases in Homer Glen prior, as opposed to other villages. And I just think, especially again with the 159th Street construction, it's so important that we make that extra effort to really try to support these businesses as they go through this, because we know that it'll impact that. One of the things that when we were running as a slate that we really wanted to look to do was to work with businesses and the community together. And this Saturday I'll be working with K9 Coutures, which is over by Chesney's in that shopping center there. And we're gonna have like a small fundraiser where you can bring your dogs or your pets to get their picture taken with Santa. And we're just asking for a small donation, and then that donation will go to a local charity to help some of the animals that, over the winter, there's actually a lot of expenses that come up for taking care of these animals in the winter. So if you find yourself Saturday, anytime between 9:30 and 2, you could come by and just bring your dogs or your cats and get your picture taken. We would appreciate it.
Thank you, Trustee Rogers. Trustee Suisse?
Thank you, Mayor. Reporting for the Environment Committee, just wanted to say to mark your calendars for our 2016 Earth Day Arbor Day event, which will take place on May 21. Applications and information have been emailed to this past week to the vendors and demonstrators, but we're always looking for someone unique to add to our listing. The Environment Committee would like to welcome the new appointment of Nancy Carlson to our committee, and we thank the board for their support. Reporting for the Homer Harvest Days Committee, our December meeting was canceled, so our next meeting will not be until January 7th. At that time, we'll commence updating our applications in the website for our 2016 event, which will take place the second weekend in September 10 and 11. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Suisse. Is there a treasurer's report?
No, I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Clerk?
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but touching on what Trustee Rogers said, I sent out nearly 300 commercial business registration renewals for 2016. So there's got to be something you could shop local for. I know not all of them offer retail products that you might wrap up. Still, let's support our local businesses.
Thank you. Village Attorney?
No report, Your Honor.
Public Service and Safety Officials?
Next 1 minute, please.
Lieutenant Fish?
For the record, Lieutenant Fish. It's more of a public service announcement I want to make. I'm sure probably there's been some people in the room that's already received some of these calls. We're getting quite a few complaints or quite a few calls to our station. I've been meeting with a few groups lately. I've been hearing the same things from these groups of people I've been meeting. A very common phone scam that's going on right now, which I understand why it's happening now. It usually happens during the period of April and May and June. But somebody will call any resident. There's no a specific group that they would call. It's not like it's a seniors thing. It's not like it's any certain group of people. But a person will call and represent themselves as a member from the IRS or somebody from the IRS and try to scare the person they're talking to and thinking they're delinquent in some taxes and do some kind of threats to the individuals, such as the fact that if you don't pay us $2,000 or $5,000, whatever number they want to make up, that the police will be showing up at their door in the next 45 minutes and arresting them on a warrant. The IRS, nobody wants to talk to the IRS, obviously, but the IRS will never call anybody on a phone. They'll never make a phone call to a resident. So we tell everybody, if you see a number that shows up in your caller ID and you don't recognize it, don't answer it. If you do answer it and somebody's reporting themselves to be from the IRS, hang up on them. The IRS, whoever wants to contact somebody in reference to taxes, they don't do it on the phone, they'll deliver the message through the mail. That's it. Thank you.
Village Manager?
No report.
Thank you. All right, next is going to be public comment. Sir? First is going to be Marion Bozen.
Well, Mary Ann Wilson, Glen. I drive by Woodbine often, I live right around there, and I was wondering, when are you going to begin construction or work on it? Because I never see anybody there. Does anyone have an answer?
We should have the plans done and before us one day next week. It'll go out to bid the week after that. You got to figure a couple weeks for the bidding process, and then for us to be able to go through the bids that are put before us, and we plan on having them swinging hammer by February.
And when do you think it'll be finished?
We're hoping, they feel they can get it done within 6 months, so that we meet in July.
Oh, and how much rent do you pay on this building? Is that somewhere around $20,000?
Very close.
A month? Right, because I really think we've really spent a lot of money just renting this building. And I know you said about the gas tax. Well, personally, I'm against it, and I'm also against the other because of that. I have gone around, and I hope that everybody would be willing to wait until the next election, because we are going to have at the election time, where no one in Homer Glen can raise the taxes without the body of voters voting on it, not even 1 cent, and it will be on a referendum that will be coming in the election. And I hope that you will wait until you find out what the people, not the 6 people, but the people, the voters, think on this referendum, and make sure you get down there to vote on it.
Are you talking about the
referendum that will be...
that Mr. Balich put together?
Yes, hopefully it will be on the referendum, it will be on the,
Well, what I would do is talk to Mr. Balich, because before we even discussed this, we ran it past him. He's perfectly fine with this.
well, I'm not talking about him alone. I'm talking about the people who vote in Homer, because there are a lot of people I know that would be against it. And I really think we should have our meetings again in the Homer, advertised in the Homer Horizon, so that people can get out and know more or less what is transpiring in there.
Okay.
And then I just have one more unfortunate thing that I would like to say. When I was at a meeting, I heard something said, and I don't know if it's the truth or if it's a falsehood, but somebody told me that there was some money missing from the Homer Glen treasurer. Is that a falsehood?
Is that possibly the...
That might be the IMET theft that they're working on recovery from a year to year and a half ago. They're still working on recoveries.
And we've gotten a bunch of the money back already, too.
And you got the money back?
Not all of it yet. We're still working on it. The government's involved in this.
Because somebody had mentioned that to me, and I was quite surprised, and I
There's
didn't...
200 Illinois municipalities involved in an investment pool of funds where there was fraud and criminal theft, and they're seeking recovery, and it's going to take some time. It should get a sizable recovery in 2016, and there's lawsuits also pending that should aid in the recovery also.
Oh, good,
So
good.
I think that's what you were hearing.
Yeah, yeah, because that's what they said, and I was just, wondering about that. Yeah, but try to have your meetings advertised, and there's a lot of people who are not computer savvy, and a lot of seniors who do not know, and they watch, and it would be informative. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mary Ann. Second would be Lynn McGarry.
Hi, Lynn McGarry, representing the Homer Township Chamber of Commerce. The president of the chamber, Larry Kilmer, the director Jane, and I were able to sit down with Janie this week and review the 159th Street Corridor Business Identity Sign Project. That's a long name. With Janie. The chamber wishes to state its support for what we feel is a very worthy project. Any way we can help our local businesses survive the construction should be a high priority. So everybody, please don't try and avoid 159th Street. In fact, let's try taking it on purpose, and I know it's going to be hard. Second thing, I've heard that you only got so very few responses to the 3-cent tax. The chamber this week, and I don't know if you've all seen it, we put out a survey 8 days ago. It was, we used the wording from your blog to explain the 3-cent tax. So I thought it was very clear, and it was support or not support. We had 55 people answer our survey, so that was a good response. But it was the same thing. It was so close, so many against and so many for, that it essentially was 50-50. But I was really pleased with the response, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Next would be John Coy.
I have two things. The quickest one will be, Mike, did you ever clean the culvert by the bike trail over at Yangus?
Yes, I did.
Because I was just out there 4 days ago, and there's a big 10-foot tree sitting in front of the one side of the culvert, so I don't
Let us
know.
know as soon as you see something, we will get out there as quickly
Like I
as we
say,
can.
4 days ago it was there.
Okay.
I have a thing, I've had a little trouble with Medicare and supplement insurance. Supplement insurance for Medicare people are supposed to be, you have to renew it from October 15th through December 7th. October, I got a letter, we're sending you a new card from the one I had, the supplement. You are a member in good standings. We love having you as a customer, blah, 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 blah. Then after just filing it, November 20th, I get another letter, 8 pages, and in it, it's stated in one big paragraph, I'll just make it short. You are a valued member. Your rates for 2016 will be the same. They will not change. You are a valued member, blah, blah, blah. Here we go again. So I'm thinking, I'm going to stick with this company. Then, December 3rd, and it's a Thursday. So I got from the 3rd, which I couldn't do anything. I didn't get the letter till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I got the 4, 5, and 5 and 6 are the weekend. 7, I got 2 days. Then to find somebody that'll help me figure out which would be the best program for me. Because they sent me a letter stating that my rates for the one medication that I paid part of, $455 each time I renew that prescription, were gonna double. I mean, how can these insurance companies do this? I called 4 places that Medicare told me to call, and everyone says there is no way you're going to be able to get any help. Believe it or not, I called Christine Regando's office, and her staff helped me. Now, next year, it would be, we have enough seniors in our community, especially with 2 senior homes, that I think it would be in our best interest to help our people by hiring somebody from this shift, they call it shift or shift. And they go through their computer and they come up with all the best programs for the people that are on Medicare. And I've been seeing one because I've been on disability for about 20-some years, and these people are fabulous. And like I say, I'm gonna take a bite, but it's not as big as I would have taken without this help. And I think we should really look into it. In Long Run Creek, I don't know what the deal is there, but anyway, it's gonna be interesting listening. But like I said, the money, it's getting faster and faster, the water going through it. It's getting deeper and deeper. And we just have to watch out when we do the rest of 143rd Street. And right now, they're building another subdivision at 139th, right west of Wolf Road, where I think some of their water now is being, they're gonna hit Long Run too. So, Orland's gonna be shipping us some more water. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Next one will be Scott's Sedilkis.
Yeah, I signed it on here really to answer any of the board's questions relating to number I-1, so.
Okay, thank you. And last would be Bob Schmidt.
I'll try not to bore you. Hi, Bud. How are you? Hello. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I know I always have a lot to say, but I'll make it simple. We'll talk about the last time. First of all, I am not in favor of it. It's very simple. None of you are at the point of receiving Social Security. All right? And I'll bet you're not aware that we are not going to have an increase in our benefits. Now here comes the village. Oh, well, what the hell? We don't care if they don't get any money. We'll get more out of them. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. That's not what we deserve. Now, no matter what you say about where you're going to put that money, nobody has ever explained exactly where it's going. Generalities. I realize that's what politicians do. I'm from the government. I'm here to help you or to prove you. Next thing. Let's see what we have here. On about the Long Run Creek issue. That has been here since time began. And for us to do anything to that cemetery would be tantamount to destroy our word. Community and nature in harmony. And that's talking about the business on 159th. Well, until 159th is reconciled, nobody wants to sit there and put up a building and have nobody be able to vet to it. That's very naive, ladies and gentlemen. One of the reasons that Connie and I decided to pull the plug was one, we're old enough. All right? At that time, I didn't know that my wife was ill, but as it turned out, is coming home standing. And that, I didn't want to tell you. The other thing that was a little disappointing from all of you, the only one that cared about Connie was them. I don't know. I know George asked out Connie, and he's done it not more than once. He's done it a lot. And I appreciate that anyway. But yet, nobody else. You know, her and I have been together 47 years. We've lived here 47 years. And I just thought we deserved a little bit better. But anyway, with Social Security not giving us a raise, all right? But every one of them small governments wanted it into our pocket. So I say, no thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and fool around all you want. This is how you want.
Thank you, Bob.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's it for public comment right now. We're going into legislation and action items. I will need a motion to consider the approval of ordinance number 15-050, an ordinance granting one special use permit for an automobile repair and service shop in the C3 General Business District. 2, a variation to reduce the required front yard setback from 45 feet to 30 feet for an existing building and parking lot. 3, a variation to allow parking within the required front yard. 4, a variation to allow paving within 5 feet of the property line. 5, a variation to allow a single automobile display in the required front yard, subject to 3 conditions as noticed. For certain real property located at 15723 South Nico Drive, Homer, Glen, Illinois, ZR1 Properties LLC, case number HG 1516SV. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there discussion?
Yes, Mayor, I think, number 1 through 4 has been more or less, I don't know how to say it, it's not bookkeeping, but it was something that we have to clean up a little bit because it was that way prior to incorporation, if I understand that correctly, Director? Maybe you're a doctor, Director Shorts. Number 5, I do have an issue with because that is something that was done just recently, and maybe I'd like to hear from the petitioner at this time.
Sure. Tell me here, I knew that would be the one sticky issue, as it were. Long story short, I purchased American Auto Restoration, which is at 15823 South Anaco Drive. I purchased that in October of 2014. Prior to my purchase of that business and in anticipation of it, I purchased 15723, which is kind of an industrial condo unit right next door. Perfect spot for us to expand into. Basically, got the property before I bought the existing business, and in my zealous haste to get set up for that business, I went and I got a landscaper who did some cleanup in the front area of that building, because I had the end unit where all the existing green space is. Thought it would be a neat idea to have a nice paver cobblestone display area for finished classic cars that we do. So you got a real nice shiny new Corvette, and we're actually doing a 60s Batmobile now, something really neat and cool we could set out there and kind of draw a little attention to ourselves. Spent quite a bit of money to do it. I hired a professional landscaper to put it in. Didn't think, okay, and I have a law degree too, so shame on me. I should have thought we need to get a building permit. But I hired a professional landscaper, and my assumption is that he probably would have handled anything in that regard, although I didn't ask. So he goes ahead, builds it, he's paid for it, it's beautiful, works out great. Come to find out later on, should have pulled a permit, which, you know, it's, you know, I can blame the landscaper, but ultimately it's my project, it's something that I should have known. sunk quite a bit into it. My personal opinion, it's an addition. It does detract from, lawn space, but it made the property more attractive, at least in my opinion. And frankly, in the opinion of the planning committee, or the building, the planning committee that I was here before about 3 weeks ago. In short, that's it. I mean, I have it there as a display. Right now, I'm trying to expand operations into that building, which is why we've got the special use permit application here. I still want to retain use of that for the restoration business, to put a nice car out there and make the property even more attractive. But again, it was done I went off the reservation to do it, and I just hope that you guys would be kind of retroactively approve it, and any fees or penalties that are associated with it, of course, I'm willing to pay.
Are you still keeping those 2 other displays out there next door? You have 2 other vehicles on
They were
ramps.
there, and as I understand it, they were grandfathered in under prior code. They were there when I purchased that business, and yes, I keep them there. It's actually drawn in quite a bit of business for us, where we put cars out there, and people will come down to the business. So, and I thought I would upgrade. My intention on those at some point in the future is, 15723 is its own parcel, 158 is its second parcel. I'll address that next year when I want to do some future improvements to 158. Kind of throw myself on the mercy of the board again, as it were, to try to upgrade those, make those paver brick, make them a lot more attractive, if in fact we decide as a business we want to keep them anyway. But going forward, we have this newer building at 157. We did it with pavers that kind of matched the building, and that was it. It was my innocent mistake on my part not to seek any kind of approval. But I was sort of relying on a professional landscaper to get it done for me. He did it in short order, and so that was it. It only came up because we've since spent over $80,000 constructing offices in 15723 to manage the business affairs of both American Auto Restoration and the new entity that I'm going to be forming to run operations out of 157. And I thought, well, we've done that. We pulled permits and we did everything, and we've put new doors in, gotten structural steel permits, everything by the numbers there. And it was only after doing all that we realized, probably the pettiest thing that we did was the paver brick thing in the front, and we never pulled a permit for it. So now we're kind of coming to religion at the end of it all and just trying to make everything right. So.
Well, the permit is not the issue. Our zoning doesn't allow patios in the front. So it's, the permit is one little issue. The sticky issue here is the zoning ordinance doesn't allow a patio unless it's a hardship type of variance, but, I guess that could be discussed among the board.
Any other
Not at the moment.
concerns?
Well, you're saying that the 2 vehicles in the front are staying, but yet isn't that a condition of their approval on number 2?
Yeah, the photographs that you have in your packet, the first 2 photographs are the subject property we're talking about tonight. The second 2 photographs are just for reference, not being discussed tonight, the adjacent property, the American Auto Restoration. Those 2 existing display spaces are non-conforming. They were built with county, assuming there was county approval. They were built many years ago prior to the village's incorporation. So I just just to show you what, as a reference, as Trustee Swees indicated, the 5th request, variance number 4, is the display area that's in the front yard. And really, the zoning ordinance, whether it's used as a vehicle display or it's just a patio, the zoning ordinance doesn't technically allow that type of an improvement in the front yard, whether it's, like I said, a car is parked there or just having the pavers there themselves are typically not allowed. The Plan Commission, as Mr. Slikis indicated, was supportive of it, and so the ordinance you have before you this evening is based on the recommendation of the Plan Commission.
I would like to see the minutes from that meeting, because I'm curious as to why they thought this was a hardship. So if maybe we could get those before we vote on this, because I'm just not seeing it.
The minutes aren't ready. The minutes, typically there's a little bit of lag time. We have a volunteer that does our minutes for those meetings, and I can obviously ask her to kind of expedite those if possible. But I was at the meeting, and basically, you know, like I said, the staff report, the recommendation of staff to the commission was not to approve the last request, that very particular variance for the front yard, based on the tests that are strictly under the zoning ordinance as far as meeting the hardship requirement and being a unique situation. I mean, that's somewhat subjective. It is unique, like I said, the issue is that it was done, the landscapers, or for whatever reason, did not pull the permit, it was not caught. We would have told them at that point in time, no, we don't allow, you know, it's supposed to be a green space, a front yard.
Right, so if they would have come for a permit, they wouldn't have gotten a permit.
Right.
But I'd like to point out too, in that neighborhood, I have probably more green space in front of that building than really any other building there. In fact, most of the other businesses have paved over the entire front sections of their property and use it as parking. And I have no intention of doing that. I'll never petition to do that. I'm not petitioning to do that. To me, it was an improvement on the green space that was there. It was kind of boring. It was a big green slab. It was just grass. We put something up there that was done professionally, and you know, it matches the brick facade of the building, and frankly, I think I won the plan commission over that it actually looks a lot better with it. So I grant you it was done going off the reservation and on the strict test as I understand it, fully admission. I'm not going to try to convince anybody other than it was just done in error. And like you said, if I had gone initially and found out it was wrong, I wouldn't have done it. It would have been, that's not worth it. I wouldn't have bothered. But now I've done it, I got a considerable amount of money into it. I'd like to retain it. And I'll use it for lack of a better phrase, classy purposes. I'm not going to put junk out there. It's not going to be a hovel, a divey place. It's meant to actually augment the property in the neighborhood. So.
And I would add, just in your packet, in the plan commission, or I should say in the ordinance that was prepared for your consideration, the three conditions, two of the three conditions that are incorporated came from the plan commission, as far as because they were supportive of the vehicle display. Conditions 2 and 3 refer to that there be any vehicle on display be in fully restored condition. And the third ordinance condition was that the paver bricks themselves be maintained in accordance with good standards. So that was sort of their recommendation to you.
Well, in my own opinion, I just would like to see their minutes, because I'm just not seeing how it qualifies for a variance. I guess I'm just missing something. Maybe you guys have more discussion on it, but I'd like to see the minutes before we vote on it.
Mayor, can we amend the motion to approve 1 through 4 and number 5 pending on the minutes of the meeting? At least we can get 1 through 4 behind us?
Sure.
Yes, we can do that. So we'll have to make a motion to amend. Yeah, make a motion to amend it to remove 5 until
I believe I made the original motion. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay, so yeah, I'd like to amend my motion to approve 1 through 4 and to table 5 until we get the minutes of the plan commission meeting.
Okay, we have a second. Is there any other discussion?
I have a question just for clarification, Mayor. The ordinance is sort of written to incorporate, number 5, because it's in the title of the ordinance, and then it's under sections 2 and 3. It references those particular conditions. So I think there'd have to be some amendments here, kind of on the fly, to strike some of those provisions here.
And I think that amendment addressed that. So you'd be removing the variation to allow a single automobile display in the required front yard, as well as the conditions 2 and 3 related to those.
Conditions 2 and 3, and then also striking under section 3, number 4.
Section 3.
May I ask a question, Mayor?
Sure.
If we just put, instead of redoing part of the ordinance and then redoing it again, is that what I'm hearing that you need to do? Can we just, if we just hold this all off until the next meeting or whatever, is that going to cause any problems with 1 and 4? Because that's already done. I mean, I think 1 of 4 was just trying to make something that was already there right.
And that's what I think we're trying to do here, is to approve all of those and get that done. And then obviously, the last variation would be a separate ordinance that would come, it would be tabled,
Well,
and
separate.
come before you, correct? So ultimately, what you'd be voting on, there would be an amended ordinance that Mike would
Yeah,
draft.
I don't know if we would need to repeal or just a supplemental, an ordinance just approving the one request by itself.
Yeah,
Okay.
with that, is that
That would
gonna,
be much appreciated if you could do that, because I will be honest with you, when I sat down with Mike to go over all this initially, I'm doing, 2 through 4 are bootstrapping to make sure that, an old building is actually now conforming. The 5th was my screw up, my land, whatever. That honestly, that's not gonna stop me from running this business. The main thing is, number 1, the special use permit, and if I have that, as I understand it, I can start operating out of there. I need to expand quickly. Making me wait they're making us wait to do that. That's the most important thing to me. The paver bricks, if you, God forbid, you tell me I have to tear it all down or something, that would not be something I'd want to do or would think it would be fair, but nevertheless, special use is what I need. The rest of it is kind of just scenery to me. So I guess I'm just kind of laying the cards there, so.
well, is everyone comfortable with that? Because I mean, that basically gets him moving. And if, we'll take 5 and that will be on its own merit, whether it stays or whether it goes. Okay.
So we'll
if
try to
that's
bring
the
that, we'll
case-
bring that supplemental ordinance back at your next meeting.
Yeah, it'll be the first week in January, or the first meeting in January.
January 13th.
Okay. January 13th? So, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers? Aye. Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy
Aye.
Okay, then you've got, go ahead on everything but number 5, and we'll get the paper so everyone's comfortable with it. And then
So we're okay to start wrenching on cars tomorrow?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
thank you. We're on number 2. Is there a motion to approve resolution number 15-012, a resolution approving a $6,291.19 reduction of the development guarantee for the Richards Building Supply Development from the current amount of $37,447.63 to the new amount of $31,156.44?
So moved.
From trustee Costa,
I second.
trustee Solis. Do we have any discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Nancy Turkey?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Costa?
Aye. Motion carries. Third on the agenda, is there a motion to approve the attached 2016 meeting calendar for the Village Board, Planning Commission, and Village Committees?
I so move.
First, trustee Suisse,
I'll second.
trustee Trakey. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy Turkey?
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 4, October legal bills. Is there a motion to approve the October 2015 Mahoney Silverman and Cross LLC legal bills in the amount of $5,585.00?
So moved.
First, trustee Costa.
I second.
Second, trustee Rogers. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy Turkey?
Aye.
Did you note that, trustee? Okay, number 5, September and October Administration Hearing Officer bill. Is there a motion to approve the village's September and October Administration Hearing Officer bill in the amount of $760?
I so move.
First by trustee Suisse,
I'll second.
second by trustee Knight. I'm going to share that.
I know, we gotta show that.
Second by Christine. All right, is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy Turkey?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers? Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, is there a motion to approve a change in John Sawyer's employment status from contract employee to a part-time IMRF eligible village employee effective January 1st, 2016?
I so move.
First by trustee Suisse,
Second.
second by trustee Costa. Is there any discussion?
I just wanted to add, I think that it's definitely a good move on the village to do something like this. Not that we want control over you, John, but I think it just gives us a little bit more control over you, John. In that we can kind of dictate the hours more and things like that, but, and we appreciate you doing what you did for so many years, but I think this is probably best for the village.
I do agree.
I have a comment as well.
Yes, trustee Suisse.
Thank you. I just want everybody to know, this does not increase, it does not do an increase for the status, so it stays the same, or, no, it's lower even.
No, it's
It's a
$5.
$5.
Oh, $5,
It's a
that's
$5
right.
increase.
For the year.
For the year.
So, but like trustee Rogers had said, now he's one of the family rather than just contract.
She wants control of you, see?
Thank you.
All right. So with that being said, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Cabria?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Suisse?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy
Aye.
And I vote aye too for you. All right, 7, 159th Business Identity Sign Bid. Is there a motion to accept the bid document submitted by the lower bidder, Western Remac, for the 159th Street corridor businesses, identity signs to project, to support businesses, to approve funding from the bond fund, and not to exceed amount of $30,000 to cover primary project costs, support additional new businesses that open, replace any damaged gateway signs, and cover any final sign removal costs at the conclusion of use in relation to the IDOT 159th Street Improvement Project.
So moved.
By trustee Costa,
I'll second.
by trustee Caprio. Is there any discussion?
I know we talked about this in A&F, and I just want to reiterate, or I guess I want a confirmation that this is a one-time purchase, right? If the business owner's sign disappears or is damaged, that's on them to replace it, correct?
Correct. We will supply the first, IDOT is going to put one sign up, letting everybody know that all the businesses are open. We are going to supply the sign that is going to tell what the business is. We have talked to IDOT, they will make sure that all the businesses are always open and able to get to them. They might not be able to go through the driveway that they want, but they will be able to access all the businesses so we don't get them hurt. The signs we are paying for, we're paying to make sure they're put up for all the businesses, and we will take them back down. But if a sign does get damaged or gets lost, if we don't find out who damaged it, we can't supply the second one because it could happen at any time.
Well, could you clarify that? What if we find out who damaged it?
Well, then we should go after the person that damaged it, but that would have to be the business owner.
Well, when you say we should go after it, is that something the village is going to do then? For me?
Well, we've got the best police department around.
Right, but let's say a kid steals it and he finds them, because I'm sure he will, we're still not going to replace that.
No, we're not gonna replace it. If they find it, we're gonna get the sign back in.
You know what I'm saying?
I do. But no, the signs are a one-time deal for us because otherwise we could be spending $60,000 for the sign. And we want to make it fair for the residents, also along with the businesses.
Can I just have one clarification too? Did we work on the gateway signs and making sure that they're not gonna blow over, they're not gonna be, okay, yeah, I didn't have a chance to go through it all.
Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Suisse?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy
Aye.
Okay, next, is there a motion to approve a contract with HR Green for Phase 2 engineering services for the Village of Homer Glen's Goodings Grove extension to the Heroes Trail, not to exceed amount of $25,984.67? Is there a motion?
I so move.
Trustee Suisse, is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Costa, is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Knights-Kachoriki?
Aye.
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Suisse?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Okay, last one. Motion to direct drafting of a motor fuel tax ordinance. Is there a motion to authorize the finance director and village attorney to draft a motor fuel tax ordinance with an effective date of March 1st, 2016?
So moved.
Trustee DiCaprio?
No second.
Second by Trustee Costa. And discussion, and if you,
Mayor.
if you wouldn't mind, could I?
Oh.
Okay. To some of the questions that were put out there by the residents, Bob, we did dedicate exactly where that money is going to. And the reason that we're doing this in the first place, we bought a golf course that we tried keeping open, so there was no cost to the residents whatsoever. If anything would have helped us out, we wouldn't have spent a penny on it. We would have gotten some money out of the golf course. It would have been monitored. It just would have been better all along. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. So what we had to do then is hire a company to come in and just cut the grass. Not weed it, not feed it, not water it, not trim it, not edge it, just cut the grass. That cost was around $67,000 just to mow the lawn. Now, with it being a park and us opening it, it's going to be more than a mowing. Now, you are going to be trimming, you are going to be edging, you are going to be fertilizing it, we are going to be watering it, so the cost will go up. So what we have discussed between the trustees and the staff is we are going to put our own group together that will be staff, not a parks department, that will now maintain the grass ourselves. So we are going to have to buy some equipment to be able to do it. We will put part-time help on in the summertime to make sure that we can get the grass cut, because then it keeps the payroll down. Wintertime, we don't need them because fortunately we have the highway department that does a phenomenal job. And the person that will be in charge of making sure that all the stuff is done for the village, in the wintertime, he can go ahead and do some, just snowblower type of work to get things out of the way for the village, if anyone needs some help. If we have any electrical problem, he's there to fix an electrical problem. He's a jack of all trades and he's very good at all of them. So we will come in cheaper than what we're putting out right now to all the companies, because we can go part-time. We can do it with part-time help, and we can do it at our leisure. And we can make sure that it's done correct. So the 3 cents, honestly, is going to the Parks and Recreation and land acquisition. If there are some properties that we would like to buy, there's no other funding for it. Right now, the state of Illinois is still holding back some of our sales tax. That's what we live off of. Sooner or later, they're going to come out with a final figure of what they are going to keep. And they are going to keep some of it. We'll never get back what we used to. With that being said, we have to make sure that the bills are covered, because if we don't make sure that we have the money to do this, the only other way you can do it with that is an honest God tax. And whether this law goes through with putting anything before a referendum, Marianne, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if the village needs something to stay above water, we can do it. Because our whole job here is to make sure that the residents are taken care of, the businesses are taken care of. We watch what we spend, which, since this board's come into, is the group that we have before us, we are very frugal about everything that we do. Some people tell me we're too frugal. I don't think so. I don't feel we should spend money that we don't need to. But the 3-cent gas tax, if you look at the surrounding areas, Orland has too. They have a 6-cent gas tax for Cook County, and they have a 6-cent gas tax for Orland Park. Look at what Orland Park has bringing into them. They charge a property tax and sales tax, and their sales tax is higher than what our sales tax is. So they're telling you right there that they need it too. We're not trying to jam anything down anyone's throat. This is nothing like the first time home rule went around. Home rule was never brought out to the village unless you came to a meeting and you heard about it. Otherwise, you found out after it was passed and it was being charged. We have brought this up in the last few months. We have tried to explain it the best way possible, and that's telling you the truth. The 3 cent, I understand that a lot of people are on fixed incomes. I still understand that the recession, as far as I'm concerned, is still not over. But we have an opportunity here to just put a little bit in there. We could have taken up to a nickel to start. Bolingbrook right now is at 9 cents a gallon. So we started at 3 because we don't want to get greedy. All we want to do is make sure that we're covering ourselves. If the sales tax is held back from us eventually, and we run out of money to run the village, if there's money in that fund, I guarantee we're going to pull some out of it, because otherwise we won't be able to pay the bills. At the same token, nothing's written in stone that this tax stays with us forever. If we can get some business in there to help, if you get the businesses in there, it helps 2 ways. One's a property tax, because we don't get any of that, but it goes to the schools. There's no impact on the schools, so it's a definite plus for the schools. Any business that we get in here and they do any kind of sales, now the sales tax comes to us. If we've got the money that we don't have to worry about going in any other direction, we can eliminate that gas tax just as fast as we started it. We're not doing it to hurt anybody. We're doing it to protect ourselves. The motor fuel tax that the state takes right now, did we get any checks from the state yet? Because I know they're starting to free up the money.
In 2016, they stated that they would retroactively fund. We're about 4 or 5 months in arrears on MFT tax.
And what everyone here has to understand, we still have to pay him or he can't do his job. So the money's coming out of ours, and we'll get it down the line, but you know how that goes. You keep feeding the monster, you start losing all the money. We don't want that to happen. This board, I don't feel could be any more open or truthful to anyone in here. And anyone that's watching on the TV or reading the stories in the newspaper. We try to be as absolutely crystal clear as glass would be. And we have been straight up. We've been telling everyone, we have said exactly where it was going to go to. It is going to parks, recreation, and land acquisition. That's the only thing that we have set up for it right now. God forbid something happened, and I'm talking God forbid, it gets to the point where we're like another town that's a little bit west of us. It's pretty close to bankruptcy. We're covered. So with that being said, if there's any other questions and someone doesn't feel comfortable with this, call me. I'll explain anything you guys got. But Trustee Suisse, you wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to make a statement again that this is not a vote to approve
True.
this tax. It is a vote so that they can work on an ordinance so we can see more details on it. And also on the committee recommendation, you mentioned it verbally now, and land acquisition.
And land acquisition.
I just would like to see, in the ordinance, I think there's a misconception out there that this 3 cents is exclusive for Woodbine, and it's absolutely not. So I'd like somewhere in the ordinance for it to phrase to state our current parks names, because there's some confusion in the town over whose park belongs to the village and whose park belongs to the township. So I'd like to see that in there, so that everybody understands that this isn't just a Woodbine thing. Woodbine is a big monster, but there are other little monsters out there that also need maintenance and improvements. And I'd like to see some language in there a little bit more specific as to what it's going to report. Parks and Recreation's a little bit more specific so far as, you know, the maintenance and the upkeep and whatever else, the staffing, just some more details so that everybody's clear on what it is.
Okay, and that's exactly what we will do. Right now, we do have some parks, and if there were additional parks put in as time goes on, they would just be added to the ordinance, so this way they also know that there's one in Evelyn Gates right now that he wants to turn over to us. We did not accept it yet, but that would be another part that we would have to take care of once we do accept it. And a lot of the new subdivisions that are coming up, we don't know what they're going to do for park-wise, so we will be acquiring more. That means more cost. We do not want to start a parks department. We don't need a parks department. Because that is a very big cost, and if we do that, you will have a property tax for the Parks Department, it won't security for the village. We don't need them, we can work around it. No, just a Parks Department right now. Parks District, I don't see why we don't need one of those. Any other questions or any other comments? Good. Okay. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Casca?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Nixon?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. Next is a workshop item. Development Services Director Salamowicz will provide some background information regarding tonight's presentation.
Thank you. Tonight we have with us Steve Zimmerman, who is a senior ecologist with Applied Ecological Services. He was the author of the Long Run Creek Watershed-based plan. Basically, well, he's going to provide his presentation. The board members should have received a copy of the executive summary, and if any of the board members want to review a copy of the full watershed plan, we do have hard copies available, or we can get electronic copies. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Zimmerman and let him do his presentation.
You want other lights?
It's good.
Okay. You guys want me to stand up here somewhere?
Can you stand at the podium?
I can, sure.
You can turn it if you need to.
If I talk, I'm not real good with these. If I talk loud enough, can everyone hear me? Fine.
Sure.
Okay. I don't like to stand still too much here. So yes, I'm Steve Zimmerman. I'm a senior ecologist with Applied Ecological Services. I've been there for almost 15 years, and I am the author of the Long Run Creek Watershed Plan. And I'm going to essentially give you a summary of what this plan is, what it means, how it can be used to get funding for projects. But to start, it's a little bit of background. In 2010, the Long Run Creek Watershed Planning Committee, as it is, applied for a grant to the Illinois EPA. It's a 319 grant to actually write this watershed plan. And Marcia DeVivo was kind of the lead, if you will, in forming this committee, getting matching funds from the municipalities, and kind of getting this thing started and running all the meetings and things like that. But really, the plan was brought to the attention, or the problems were brought to the attention of the community for three reasons. The quality of the creek, for one, was declining. There's the Heinz Emerald dragonfly, which a lot of you have heard a lot about, I'm sure, is a state endangered and federally endangered dragonfly species with habitat found in the watershed. And also, one of the lakes in the watershed was found to be a 303D listed lake, which means the EPA says it's impaired for water quality for various reasons. So that kind of all led to getting this plan together, which is an ecologically based plan to improve the health of the watershed, to first and foremost improve the water quality, because that's what the EPA requires that the plan focus on, is water quality first. But it also touches on flooding, habitat improvement, natural resources, all kinds of different avenues. Just quickly, so with our company, because I know a lot of you don't know a lot about us, we're an ecological consulting company. I work out of our consulting division out of our West Dundee, Illinois office up in Kane County. Our office is right on the Fox River. We also have a contracting division that actually builds our restoration projects based out of Huntley. Our main office, by the way, is in Broadhead, Wisconsin, just north of Rockford. And at that office, we also have a native plant nursery that supplies all the native plant material to our contracting division to implement. So we're kind of a one-stop shop for ecological restoration projects. So just our experience with watershed planning, when I first started with AES, one of my first jobs was a watershed plan. We've done a dozen of these over the past 10 or 15 years. Long Run, we've done a couple since Long Run Creek, but Long Run Creek plan was actually finished in March of 2014. So it's been a while since it's been out there. I was going to give this presentation a little sooner, but I had some surgery and was out for 4 months earlier in the year. So it kind of got delayed, but finally here we are. I've given this presentation to 3 other communities that are part of the watershed. And a couple of those communities, as Mike told me earlier, have actually adopted this plan, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so in layman's terms, what is a watershed? Essentially, it's an area of land, and I've got an exhibit here, that water drains from and eventually to a stream, river, or lake. So this whole entire area that drains eventually to this point here is called a watershed. And the location of the Long Run Creek watershed, if you look over here, obviously it's, you know where it's at, but it's kind of split by Will and Cook County. It drains to the Des Plaines River, and actually it drains to the I&M Canal, which then flows south before joining the Des Plaines River. But it flows from east to west, and eventually to the Illinois River, down to the Mississippi, and eventually to the Gulf of Mexico. And what is watershed planning then? So I'm just going to read this. It's voluntary, and that's important to know. None of this is required. It was basically Marcia DeVivo getting a bunch of stakeholders together to help support this and pay for a little bit of this. But it's a voluntary, community-supported approach to protecting and improving water quality, like I said, first and foremost. Protecting groundwater, restoring habitat, reducing flooding, providing recreational opportunities for people. So it's a whole suite of different things that's covered under watershed planning. So here is the watershed, and this is called a DEM, a digital elevation model. The bluer areas are lower in topography, and as you get higher up, it turns more of a brown color. But here's Long Run Creek, so it extends, all the way up here. That's the main branch. And I always show these exhibits first because it's important to know what this area was like before Europeans moved in and kind of altered everything for the worse, unfortunately. Basically, the west half of the watershed, where you had more relief and more topography, was dominated by these oak woodlands and oak savannas. And as you move out to the east, where it would flatten out, you had prairie, which was essentially open grassland with patches of oak woodland here and there, but wooded and then more prairie up in here. And as you move up in watersheds, within the prairies, you get a lot of wetlands that are mixed in with those prairies. And it's important to know that because wetlands were looked at poorly, I guess, by people years ago. And really, wetlands are probably the most important component of a watershed as far as keeping it healthy, is actually having wetlands in place and not draining them. A little bit about the jurisdictions now that we have in the watershed. And really, I'm just going to focus on Homer Glen here. So you can see Homer Glen has the biggest stake out of any of the other municipalities in the watershed. It's a very large component of it. You've also got Lockport down here, Lamont, Orland Park, Palos, the Forest Preserve here, and there's also some IDNR nature preserve land down here. Really quickly, this is kind of a busy map to look at, I realize, but it's the existing land use map. At least as a couple of years ago, there might have been some updates to this. But looking at it, residential is the highest or most abundant land use in the watershed at 44%. There's about 12% ag land, and this forest, grassland, wetland, which makes up kind of these forest preserve areas, is 21% of the watershed, which is actually a pretty decent amount. So Back in the fall of 2012, when we first got this contract, myself and a couple of my colleagues went out for basically 2 weeks straight and drove around the watershed, got out and looked at all the streams, all the detention basins, everything we can look at. We walked through all the forest preserves just to get an idea of what was in the watershed. We had data sheets we'd fill out to lead to this, and I'm going to talk about several different components of the watershed that we've looked at specifically. So streams and tributaries. By the way, the gentleman running the camera mentioned to me earlier, what's the difference between a creek? Is a creek different than a stream? And a creek and a stream are basically the same thing. You can have perennial or intermittent. A perennial stream or creek is always flowing. Intermittent means it dries out from time to time. And with that said, Long Run Creek more or less is a perennial stream. It always has water in it. A lot of these secondary streams that run into Long Run Creek are intermittent in nature. They'll flow in the spring and in fall, but they do dry out in summer months. So we actually walked portions of every single stream in the watershed, and there was a study done by Integrated Lakes Management several years ago that we used to supplement what we looked at. And what this exhibit shows is the amount of the stream bank erosion. So the banks basically falling into the creek as a result of increased stormwater that's being produced and directed to the creek. And what you see here, generally speaking, is that the erosion up in these areas where it's flatter, where I said it was prairie, the concrete's more flat, erosion is not terrible. So green means there's relatively no erosion. Yellow means there's moderate amounts, but as you get down here where there's more relief and more gradient to these streams, the red indicates stream reaches that have significant amounts of erosion. And most of these are highly eroded because of new stormwater inputs. Historically, these were probably just little drainages through the woodlands that hardly ever carried water because it was soaked up by the surrounding land. But now with all these detention basins and impervious roads and buildings, the water is being directed to these. And an increase in the stormwater basically carves out these eroded channels through these areas. And this is just a couple of photos here. You can see the stream bank erosion. I can't remember exactly where I took these. This is down, I think, in the golf course down here, so there's not a lot of erosion. This was taken, I believe, right up in here. It's moderate erosion. So another thing we like to do, and well, I don't know if I like to do it, but we look at all the detention basins. And in this watershed, we identified, we got plans from municipalities that showed us where all the detention basins and things like that were. And we actually went out and looked at 185 detention basins we found in the watershed. So that just tells you right there, all our stormwater goes to a detention basin, which is engineered to hold stormwater, but not necessarily to clean the stormwater for water quality purposes. And what we found is of the 185 detention basins, you don't have to get all caught up with the colors here, but I think the red around the perimeter of these circles means that those detention basins really didn't serve any ecological or water quality function. All they did was take stormwater and get rid of stormwater. So that's a significant finding. This is an example of one here where it is designed for water quality purposes. But you have a lot of basins like this that have these concrete channels that run from the inlet to the outlet. And that is probably the most poorly designed basin you can have from a water quality standpoint, because all the pollutants that come off of the landscape generally come off on those smaller rain events. In the smaller rain events, the water will come into the detention basin and will run straight through the channel. And it's only in the larger rain events where the water will get up in here and actually soak into the ground and have some kind of water quality benefit. So this is kind of a worst case scenario for water quality purposes. So I talked about the importance of wetlands, and what you're looking at here is in green on the map is where wetlands existed historically before development of the area. So you can see is there were wetlands everywhere, and basically what those did is they captured all the stormwater and held it and released it slowly to Long Run Creek, and Long Run Creek at that time was probably a very high quality stream. So of the 3,300 acres of wetlands that were here prior to European settlement, only 35% of the wetlands actually remain in the watershed. The rest have been tile drained for farming, developed over, those sorts of things. Just quickly, important natural areas in the watershed. There are several, the largest being the John J. Duffy Forest Preserve up here. There's actually this stretch of Long Run Creek is high quality still. Compared to all of this up here, it's still meandering and very natural. There's Long Run Seep Nature Preserve, and this is where the breeding habitat is for the Heinz Emerald dragonfly. In Homer Glen specifically, at Homer Glen Marsh, along a portion of Long Run Creek here. So Tampier Lake, which is located in the John J. Duffy Forest Reserve, is the lake that the EPA listed as being impaired for mostly phosphorus. And it's 160 acres, average depth 16 feet. Again, this is the important thing, is it was listed as 303D by the Illinois EPA back in 2010. So you don't have to get caught up in the numbers here. What I'm showing essentially here is these watershed plans. What the EPA is looking for is mostly what they want to know about is phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment, which are usually the three the things that degrade watersheds and streams most in our area. And we did some water quality sampling and had some past sampling from other reports that other entities performed. And what we found here is probably the best, just look at the average. So in red, basically means that the value for the phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment exceeded the standard that the EPA looks at as being healthy. So really that's all I want you to get from this is there's a high amount of phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment that runs through Long Run Creek. And this is a bit technical, but I'll keep it as simple as possible. Another part of the planning is to actually run a water quality model. And you put the water quality sampling data into the model along with some land use and other factors. And this is a graph that came out of the model. And what it shows you is based on the different types of land uses, where the different pollutants are likely coming from. So I'll look at the blue last because this is the interesting point. But so stream bank erosion is leading to most of the sediment that's traveling through the creek. And now we'll just jump right to the blue. So that there's 2 wastewater treatment plants in the watershed. And we had water quality data taken from the outfalls of those. And what we find is that basically, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I think 56% of the phosphorus loading is coming from the wastewater treatment plants. And it's 65% of the nitrogen that's getting into the creek is coming from the treatment plants. And I'll get back to that a little more. So then, what we have to do, because the EPA wants to see this, is you take these values that the water quality data and the model gives you, and you have to back calculate to figure out how much of those pollutants needs to be removed to get to the target values that the EPA says is healthy. So phosphorus, this is per year, needs to be reduced by 64%, nitrogen by 58%, and sediment by over 62%. And in Tampier Lake, the phosphorus needs to be reduced by 48%. per year. So significant reductions are needed, but there are solutions to that. And I'll get to that. So ultimately, what a watershed plan is meant to do is you identify all your problems, everything that's going on, and then you look for ways to improve on those shortcomings and the water quality problems that you have. So, in the watershed plan, the full document, there's literally hundreds of recommendations that we give, but the EPA wants to know what we consider to be the critical areas. So this map is a compilation of all of the highest priority or critical area potential project locations in the watershed. So it has everything from what can be done at the wastewater treatment plants here and here, Derby, and I forget what's the name of the other blank in here.
Oak Valley?
Yeah, Chickasaw and Derby. So there's recommendations about the different stream reaches that could use the most restoration work to reduce the sediment input. There's recommendations about buffers that can go around lakes, for example, or around stream corridors, potential wetland restoration sites, potential detention basins that can be retrofitted to improve water quality, agricultural land where agricultural practices such as no-till can be done to decrease sediment and nitrogen loading. And then we even looked at what we call green infrastructure protection areas, and essentially those are ag land that is proposed to be developed at some point in the future, and there's recommendations we make about what to do with the development when that happens. So just a little bit about a couple of these project types. In Glen, we found what we called 5 of the critical area potential projects. You can kind of look and see these red dots, but you can see a lot of them are right at the headwaters, these 2 specifically. So obviously the water that comes out of these 2 detention basins here forms the headwaters of this creek. So obviously improving those 2 detention basins from a water quality standpoint helps water quality in general. And Woodbine West is one of them. I think that's actually right 31B. So this is a picture of it, and basically it's just a square hole in the ground that holds water. There's no buffer or emergent plants or anything like that to actually pull nutrients and things out of the water. So that's actually this. So this is an example. Some of you have seen this photo. I gave it to HR Green, and it's part of some of their another project they're working on. I'll get to. But this is what a naturalized detention basin looks like. That's actually designed to not only hold the storm water, because that's number 1, but is retrofitted or designed in a way that it supports native plants. As you can see, emergent plants. So when this basin fills up after a flood event, the water gets up in here and the plants pull nutrients and things out of the water. And it's excellent habitat for a variety of ducks and other insects and things like that. So getting a little bit to the Woodbine project that's going on in Homer Glen here. First of all, we also found what we call 5 critical area wetland restoration projects. One of them actually being, this is the north portion of the former Woodbine Golf Course. What this is showing right here is this is the extent of the wetlands that used to be on the golf course. And I think it's like, I don't know, it's like 30 acres or something, which has been drained and is no longer wetland, but it's a very important piece because the study that the engineer HR Green is doing for you all, we're actually a sub to them on that project. And so we're working with them to come up with designs for stormwater that can be built into this area where there was existing wetland. And I think I have, so this just shows some conceptual drawings of what HR Green is proposing to the village do, and portions of the former golf courses on the very north portion, right, of the golf course. there's 2 existing ponds, but the proposal is to kind of excavate back out where some of those pre-existing wetlands were, and then plant all of this to resemble that photo I showed you earlier, that naturalized detention. And there's another portion, I believe this is in the southeast corner of the former golf course, where another example of creating some more storage for flood reduction downstream, and also naturalizing it, again, to look like that picture I showed you. And this is another project. This is an example of what basically this area in here would look like after planted with native vegetation. This is all cardinal flower. It's kind of a wetland plant. That's the one you see in red, but this is a wetland in here. And these are obviously probably 200-year-old oak trees, but what I did have HR Green throw in here, all these dots are oak trees that would be planted around the detention basin. So over time, 100 years from now, whatever, if that was done, you'd probably get to something closer, where the trees would mature, and you'd have this wetland with like a savanna, oak savanna surrounding it. This one I'm just going to touch on briefly too. In Homer Glen, there are 2 critical potential stream restoration areas. One of them, the most important, being in what's called the Homer Glen Marsh. So it's owned by the village, and this is the stream as it passes through that area. It's not the best photo because if you actually walk along here, there's significant erosion through this stretch of the stream. So the potential project that could be done there would be something like this. These are 2 projects that I managed through my days at AES. Where you have a system that kind of looks like this, in this case, where you have buckthorn and a bunch of non-native plants shading the stream, and you have stream bank erosion, and then the resulting projects are something like this or this, where you actually pull the banks back, you plant native species, you put artificial riffles in the creek, and you basically naturalize the creek and make it more habitat friendly, and you improve the buffer for habitat purposes, and eliminate the erosion, the sediment getting in the creek by restoring the eroded banks. I'm going to pass on that one for, well, briefly. So in Homer Glen, there's still some areas that are farmed, and they will likely be developed in the future, probably to some type of residential. And these 2 areas, I believe, are these 2 areas here. The important thing to look at on here is when you look at this, what do you see on here? You see where these drainage paths are, and all these dark areas in the soil. That's basically telling you where wetlands were historically. There's probably drain tiles all over in here draining all of these historic wetlands. But the idea here is, in the future when they're developed, is not to go in and mass grade these areas, but to actually use the topography and use the areas that were existing wetland to do these kind of conservation type developments, which are tricky. They can be done and look really bad, or if done right, they can actually look really good. But the idea is it's more of a cluster housing, and you preserve all of these open spaces, and those areas that were wetlands historically could be rehydrated and actually become the detention areas for the development, but then naturalized. So the 2 treatment plants. So this is, the watershed plan isn't really to explain or determine how to do upgrades to water treatment plants. But what we were able to figure out is, based on data that's out there, when you upgrade a water treatment plant, you can significantly reduce the phosphorus and nitrogen outputs. And what we determined, I don't know if I have a slide for it, but we determined if you could do that, you could essentially, if you remember that graph I showed where the phosphorus and nitrogen coming from the wastewater was so significant, that can be reduced to the point where you meet the EPA standards just by upgrading the treatment plants. So that's a huge and very significant finding. And this is my last slide. This is kind of the next steps for you all. And the first step, which a couple of the other communities have already done, is to adopt the Long Run Creek Watershed Plan. And this is very important. It's a guidance document. So the language that's written into it is very carefully written. We had a full meeting dedicated to making sure the verbiage wasn't such that it was mandatory to do anything. It's a guidance document. So that's the first step, is to adopt it and distribute educational materials to the residents, mostly, right now in the form of that executive summary that some of you have. I don't know if the village, I don't know how many copies you have, if people want one. Building demonstration projects on public land. But this is really what we need to talk about. The EPA, again, has this 319 grant program, and it's used for water quality projects. And I want to keep this simple, but what they do is in August of every year is when the due date is for applications to apply for these grants. And in the past, the EPA was getting like 300 applications a year, and they simply didn't know how to prioritize anything, didn't know where to put the funding really. So now it's mandatory that you have a watershed plan approved by the EPA, which this plan is, and you have to, the project has to be, your project that you want to put in the ground has to be in the watershed plan. Otherwise, they essentially take your application and they'll put it in a separate pile. This year, they only got 45 applications because there's only about 12.5 watershed plans done in the whole state. So what I'm telling you is, at Woodbine, for example, if you wanted to kind of go that route with these naturalized detention areas, and I realize they're first and foremost for flooding, but it can be sold as a water quality project as well. Those would stand a very high chance of actually probably getting a grant. And the grant is a 60-40, so the entity, you would have 40% and they match 60%. So if it's a $300 project, they pay almost $200,000 of that. And I want to mention too, HR Green is working on that. I don't know if they'll get into if they'll do the design or if they'll get that bid or whatever. But we've teamed with HR Green in the last 2 years on a lot of projects. And one that I want to mention, because just to show you how this works, in Carpentersville, HR Green is the village engineer, and they've got a stretch of stream almost a mile long that's degraded, similar to many stretches of Long Run Creek. So we teamed up with them, put together a grant application to the EPA, $1.2 million to restore the entire stream, got the grant, got a $700,000 match from the EPA, and we're actually building it right now. So HR Green was able to sell to the village to do it as a design build. So HR Green designed it with our input, and then we're doing the build, our company. But it shows you that the EPA is willing. They're not looking for the small projects. They want the critical area projects that are going to make an impact, and they're willing to pay for it.
Do you put in more than one application, or do you do separate projects, or what's the best strategy?
It depends on the schedule that you want to implement them on. So the applications are usually due, I think it might be August 1st or August 31st, I can't remember now. But usually it's done for one, it could be multiple projects, but that are kind of located close to each other, that could be considered one project. And by the way, it takes about 30 to 40 hours to put one of those together. And usually what we do as a company is I'll do it for free if there's kind of a handshake agreement. You get the grant, we do the design or the build or whatever, and that's how it worked out with the Village of Carpentersville. We put it together for them free of charge, and when they got it, they just went straight to HR Green and our company. And actually, I put three of these applications together just this year for another watershed plan we created up in McHenry County. 2 stream restorations and a detention basin retrofit project. So that's, if there's any other questions, I think that was my last, yes?
Can you take questions from the public? That's
Sure.
permissible? There's been some discussion. We've been dealing with Longwood Creek for a while here, and some of us have been told that where there are properties butting up against each other, private homes, okay, and Longwood Creek runs between them, that the property owners actually own that portion of Long Run Creek.
That's true.
That is true.
Yes.
Then who's responsible for maintaining that thing? We've got, and I'm sure you probably know this already, we've got an area here on, in, or around a place called Yangas Park that after a heavy rain, it just flat out floods, okay? And I don't know if it's because of lack of maintenance and cleaning out the creek, or is it that you're trying to put 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag because
That's more
it's
what it is.
That's more of it. Okay, so how do you correct that?
At this point, the damage, I hate to say it, but the damage is somewhat done because the development's in place already.
But yet that still continues, so how do you stop that?
The new development needs to include different practices, like I mentioned with the conservation development, where you keep the water on site. So everyone wants to get rid of the water, right? But then that's, the problem is when everyone does that, the water goes to the creek, and then the creek floods more often and degrades.
So who enforces that? Who comes along and says, hey, Mr. Developer, you can't dump your street water into Long Run Creek? Who does that?
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe there's a county ordinance, like a stormwater ordinance probably for.
Yeah, the village has its own ordinance, and we do any, new developments that would be coming through the village, obviously, we would be reviewing those. As far as with the the Yangas Park area, there is a large floodplain, a good portion of that park is actually within the floodplain. Now, the village we obtained a grant a few years ago from, basically, in regards to the Heinz Emerald Dragonfly and in the habitat and kind of doing projects to benefit the dragonfly. We did do kind of a small project right near the bike path on the ComEd property where we did some bank stabilization and some native plantings. And probably sometime in the spring of next year, we're going to be doing a burn in that location. And one of the whole purposes of that project was to kind of give people down the road kind of an example of here's some bank stabilization projects that they can do. A lot of times you'll see people, they're using, the creosote soaked railroad timbers and things like that, to try to stabilize their banks. And we're trying to give them different opportunities and different examples of, plantings that would stabilize the banks and really native type plantings that would restore the water quality as well too. So, as Steve had mentioned, the watershed plan has various projects in there in each of the communities that could provide water quality benefits as well as stormwater benefits, and that's certainly something that the village we will be most likely looking at some of these projects to potentially implement. One specifically, obviously, which was included in the Woodbine. The regional drainage area project was the restoration of some wetlands on the golf course or the former golf course property. So that's a potential project that can be done. And of course, now that this is an EPA-approved watershed plan, that opens us up for grant funding as well. So that would certainly help in obtaining funding to do any of these projects.
One final question. Again, like I mentioned before, putting 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag. I'm going to presume then, as a layman and looking at this thing on Google Earth and so forth, it gets wide. At one point, it goes into a little lake or reservoir area, and then it goes into a very thin creek, you might say, all the way down to the Des Plaines River. okay? The way I see it, the only way to eliminate the flooding in Yankees Park is to start at the Des Plaines River, make it a little wider, okay? I mean, it's like pouring a whole bunch of water into a funnel that has the bottom opening, the drain about that big, okay? And if we can't do that, then I'm going to have to assume that we are forever going to see, after a heavy rain, a flooded Yankees Park.
It's floodplain. And here's the thing I tell people, and nobody ever wants to hear this. Creeks are supposed to flood. It is healthy for a creek to spill out of its banks. That's how it dissipates energy. It's a natural thing, and there shouldn't be development in any floodplain, but historically that wasn't always.
I get that. It just turned out to be a lousy place to put a park.
Well, it's open space, so it's at least it's not homes.
That's true. Yeah, well, there was one there and it sunk.
Do you have any control over when people put in roads and then they put the road in and they put in detention areas to hold water and release it at a regulated rate?
Yeah, that's all covered in the county. I don't know if they have your own restriction rates. So they have an ordinance that has you have to have a restrictor on the detention basin outlet that only lets water out at a certain rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
We've got 2 of them that are just new in the last couple of years, and they said that the 6-foot box culverts under the streets are holding the water. The detention areas don't have to. But that floodplain he's talking about is flooding twice as much, twice as bad every time it rains. Because that's where the water's going. I can't see.
I don't know if I can speak. I don't know, because I don't know if you know more about that.
Yeah, again, I mean, going forward, the village adopted its own stormwater ordinance in 2009. Obviously, moving forward, any new developments, we are certainly going to make sure that they conform to our ordinance. Our ordinance was, at the time, it was more strict than the county's ordinance. So, we are working on some projects, the village over the last 2 years, we've been working on a lot of drainage projects, trying to restore detention ponds and trying to reduce the amount of water that goes into the creek directly and try to regain that volume in those detention ponds that was lost due to, just over time, sediment fills those ponds in. You get settlement, problems with the piping and that sort of thing. So we are, the board has certainly been active in approving projects in various areas throughout the village to try to reduce that flooding. So it's something we have, the village, we do know that we have a lot of problems as far as drainage. So we just have to kind of take them one at a time and try to knock each one off the list.
There was an article in the paper a month or 2 ago about these 2 water filtration plants for waste. They're the ones that are polluting the creek, and it's not minimal either. What do you guys fight to try and have them correct that?
Don't look at me.
You're pushing it's almost like you're trying to sell us a program, but if we take it, what are you going to do to help us with some of these problems?
Well, we don't even do work with wastewater treatment plants as a company.
No, but
our job was to identify where the problems are coming from, and we essentially found that over 50% of the nitrogen and phosphorus in the creek is coming from the treatment plants. So it's up to the communities and the treatment plants to find the money to upgrade, which is millions of dollars, to upgrade facilities.
Basically, they've done their job, they've done their part, they've handed the water treatment, the improving the water plan that you can take and run with, but it's up to the village, it's up to getting grants, this plan is what they've done.
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way.
They can't enforce it.
Well, you have no authority then with the Army Corps of Engineers or the villages or anything, you just...
No, we're just a private consulting company.
They've identified the problems that now each of the municipalities, would hopefully, be able to use that information to try to basically fix them.
All right. Gotcha.
Oh, by the way, just so you know, if you go to homerhighway.com, all this information is there. This whole plan, the summary, the link to it is there. You can just, homerhighway.com, I think it's under information.
And it will be on the village's website as well.
There was a question back here.
Yeah, you had a slide about the Woodbine restoration proposal. And you mentioned something about 30 acres will be taken out of service for the north side of the park, is that correct?
Yeah, and this is just conceptual at this
Right,
point.
right. I mean, just trying to get a ballpark. And then you said something about the east side as well. Was that included, 30 acres included in there?
Yeah, I don't know the total acreage. Yes, this is the southeast piece.
Okay, so if this vision was to be implemented, basically, the homes that are buffering the golf course would basically be protected by wetland or open space, or there wouldn't be a park there next to them. Is that correct?
If this was done?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, and the village has, HR Green has done a big study, and these two projects, it's flood reduction first, but infusing ecology into those designs is what we did, and I'm showing you here.
At the last village board meeting, HR Green made their presentation of the Woodbine drainage study, and these are potential projects that are included in that study. I believe the 30 acres you were mentioning was what was historically there.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that 30 acres of new wetlands are going to be constructed or potentially could be constructed. I think he was referring to historical documents showed that approximately 30 acres of that golf course were at one point wetlands.
This whole area was historically, and I know it's hard to give a scale on that, but much of the northern portion of the golf course was a wetland historically. This is probably not even half of that amount.
Was it pretty common knowledge that the subdivisions that were built there were built on wetlands? I mean, when the permits were pulled for that in 1980, whenever, did the guys already know that they were building homes on a swampland?
They probably knew it was a low area, but it technically probably wasn't wetland. For something to be a wetland, it has to actually have to go through a process, but. Yeah. It's a low area back there, from what I understand.
Those are definitely lower areas, but again, that was all prior to the village.
Oh, I know that.
If we only knew, right then what we know now, we would avoid developing in areas like that. But
question.
Yes.
You mentioned Lake Dampier was also polluted with phosphates, and that feeds into Long Run Creek.
Yes.
So they're upstream from the filtration plants or water treatment plants.
Right.
So do you know the source of the phosphates?
Yeah, and I didn't even get into that because it was listed as a 303D water body impaired. A company was hired to do what's called a TMDL for that water body. Don't worry about what that means. But what they found is that the main source of the phosphorus in the lake was internal, which basically means it's from all the wildlife and geese and duck usage. In other words, there's nothing you can do about it. So they did probably a $100,000 study just to tell the EPA it's coming from the wildlife that uses the lake.
Have goose for Thanksgiving.
Goose poop.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Anything from the board?
Okay, we thank you very much for the information, and I know we are going to run with it. So, what do you got? Everyone else all set? Okay.
What about Schmidt? I need you one.
Well, is there any old business? The only old business that I would say we have is to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas. Make sure you see all the friends and families, it's very important. And have a very prosperous New Year. We appreciate you coming out to the meetings. Thank you.
And the same to you. Thank you, everyone. And Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
All right, is there any new business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.
Marshall will.